These are our 16-bit machines. Yeah, this is our Atari ST and Amiga. So yeah, both American machines, but both oddly, neither did well in America. So the Atari ST, this was mine. I'll always be fond of the old Atari. Not as good as the Amiga, but if you owned a Spectrum or an Amstrad, you were quite likely, you went onto the Atari ST even though you know it wasn't as good as the Amiga, because you weren't going to buy a Commodore machine. It's all very silly at that time. It got very tribal. We're starting to have obviously games running off of hard drives as well by this time, so you could fit a hard drive to your Amiga. But after this, really, people either they carried on using a PC, which we'll have a look at in a second, or they went back to consoles, or they did a bit of both. So we can go and look down here at one of our earlier PCs. So we've got our Compact here, which is our Windows 3.1 machine, but if we can exit out of our early Windows, and then exit Windows, and then we're in the realm of PC DOS, so disk operating system. So for this, you needed to type commands in. So to find your games, so CD games, CD Doom 1. So anyone who would have had a PC in the early 90s or around 93, you would have played Doom at some point. Type the now you had 640k base memory, then you had high memory, which is the actual RAM of your machine. You needed as much of that 640k as possible to run your game, and it was an absolute pain, and this often happened. So basically it hasn't had enough base memory to load the sound drivers, so it's just stopped. Hurt me plenty. So yeah, here we've got one of our first person shooters. We'll go and look at the game changing, as far as the PC goes, the game changing thing that is Windows 95. Right, so this is one of our home built machines. You could build them up however you wanted. If you wanted a fast machine, you buy a motherboard with a fast processor in it, an OK graphics card. If after a while you spend another couple of £100 buying a new graphics card. But the great thing about Windows 95, for the first time, it just ran off of this Windows system. So the launcher program, literally just go and find it, or double click on the icon, and off it will run. You're not having to worry about memory. It does all that for the first time. When you install a graphics card, you're not wondering whether it's going to run or whether the install is going to go properly. So it became a real viable gaming platform for the first time, and just at the point where consoles were really starting to get really quite clever. By this point, we've got these wonderful PC machines. But you need a lot of money, so you're probably spending the price of a console on a new graphics card, for instance, and that's still true of them today. They cost an enormous amount of money. Right, so we saw the end of the home micros, and where we would have gone from then, we'd probably had a PC and done some gaming on that, but more than likely we went off onto console gaming. Right, so console gaming, early 1990s would have meant almost certainly Sega or Nintendo. So Nintendo were in no hurry to replace their old NES around the corner, the Nintendo Entertainment System. It was still selling really well, producing some really great games. Sega sales-wise were well behind, and they realised they needed a mascot, so they came up with wonderful Sonic here, and they made him the absolute anti of Mario. He's fast, he's brash, he's absolutely flying here, this game, and it's just exciting to play. So they thought, if we go for the opposite of Mario, we'll attract a different type of player, and they certainly did. And Sonic really helped them get market share back to about 50-50 when it had been about 80-20 before. There were other machines as well, like the TurboGrafx, but against these two companies, they weren't going to do much. So it took Nintendo a couple of years to come up with the Super Nintendo here, which on the face of it, it had some absolutely amazing games built for it. This is one of the later ones, so this is from about 95, Donkey Kong Country. And I do love Donkey Kong Country, it's just funny. Very, very difficult though. But in the 90s, you're in the realm of the 2D platformer. Every company was doing run along, pick up objects, in this case bananas, and reach the end of your level. So games did get a little bit samey around this period. Not to say they weren't good or popular. I think I can run to the end of the level on my little, and there we go. But yeah, Nintendo had lost a lot of market share, and at this point as well, this was around about 93, 94, when that wonderful Doom's coming out on the PC. You've got Sega at a complete war with each other. So Sega of Japan and Sega of the US openly fighting with each other. So in Japan, they're trying to develop the next console, which runs on CD. Sega of America are just keen to keep this machine going because it's doing far better than it is in Japan. So they come up with CD drive, and they come up with the 32X, which is a couple of new graphics processors that sits in a big mushroom on top. And they're doing really, really well with it. So Nintendo are thinking, we need a CD-ROM. So let's partner up with Sony, and they'll make us a machine that sits underneath our Super Nintendo, just like the Mega Drive one does, and we'll get into CD gaming that way. When it comes to it though, they notice that Sony have got sole control over the CD side, and they're going to be left without that money, without that resource. So they actually cut the deal, and Sony are absolutely furious because they were ready to launch their own machine, which would have been the Nintendo PlayStation, their own version, so cartridges from the Super Nintendo plus the CD drive. And Nintendo partnered with Philips and produced the often maligned but aren't actually that bad Zelda and Mario games for the Philips CDI here. Commodore's last outing here, this is the CD32, and then much like the MSX, we have the 3DO. So this was going to be another game standard. You would be able to build this machine. Panasonic joined in, Gold Star and a couple of others. Atari are still fighting at this point. They should really have carried on making handhelds. They were having a lot of success with their Lynx handheld, but they decided to sweep that to one side and produce what is, well, they call it the first ever 64-bit interactive multimedia. It's almost certainly not 64-bit. It's bits of it are, but not the important parts that keep the machine running. Runs off of cartridges to start with, which makes it colossally expensive. And also they added a little CD unit in here, which when you put that in there and a CD memory card in the back, it doesn't half look like a toilet. I mentioned earlier that Sega were at war with each other. Well, the Japanese wing produced the Sega Saturn. And also, just when they were about to launch this, Sony come along at a CES show in, I think it's 1994, with their new machine, the PlayStation.